Thank you, Chasen, so much for joining me today. We're really excited to have the chance to get to know you and the Aoba-Japan International School. Welcome to the audience joining us today. I'm Urvashi, the Technical Community Champion at JumpCloud. We are really excited to share how organizations around the world are dealing with challenges of digital and identity transformation. We say this a lot at JumpCloud, connecting people to the technology that they need to get their jobs done and be productive may be the most important role and challenge that an IT organization faces. Layer on the security challenges that we're all facing, and being an IT professional is not easy. So we wanted to share the best practices, lessons learned, and sage advice from the very best in the world. So with that, let's get started. Chetan, could you tell me a bit more about yourself and Aoba Japan and your journey with them?
Sure. And yeah, thank you very much. It's good to be here. And I'll give you just a little bit of background about myself and our organization. So I'm originally from California in the United States, and I've been living and working in Tokyo, which is where our organization is based, since about 2013. My current role here is as the Group Director of Innovation, and that covers quite a range of technology, infrastructure, and services, all the way from networking, directory services, endpoint devices, security, through, in our case, education technology services, tools, platforms, and approaches. And so our group is roughly 300 employees at the moment. We are a private international education group, and we have about 10 campuses in the greater we have about 10 campuses in the greater Tokyo metropolitan area. And we are in the process of launching actually an online school, which further complicates a lot of our IT infrastructure, our compliance and security requirements, support for end users, and all kinds of things. And that's where JumpCloud has really been able to help us over the past months and years.
So when you started looking at JumpCloud, what was the connection to your organization's technological needs, and how did you feel like JumpCloud could impact that? How did it play out?
Hmm, Good question. So at the time, we were looking into solutions which were offering bits and pieces of what JumpCloud offers, right? I think we were in a transition period from really a small business type model, and we are moving towards more of a medium-sized business. So as I mentioned before, we're roughly 300 employees at the moment. And several years ago, this would have been around 2017 or 18 when we were exploring solutions for more of like a hybrid infrastructure. We were closer to about 100 employees, and we've grown quite rapidly. Our infrastructure previously consisted of a lot more traditional on-premise or self-hosted tools, and none of them really connected together into a single solution or ecosystem. And a lot of these would have been things which most of the people watching this video are quite familiar with, I think. So we're looking at things like Active Directory, on-premise server services, whether that's LDAP or Radius or anything else. In particular, we are a sort of a Mac shop. We have a lot of Apple devices, iPads, iPhones, MacBooks, iMacs, and things like this. And we were using some of the more traditional enterprise management tools for those endpoint devices as well. And some of the tools in that mix included things like Monkey Server, Auto PKG, and a lot of other sort of bespoke or homebrew tools, which are quite popular in the Mac administration world. But which, as we were growing, and we were growing in the number of employees we were managing devices and services for, our student numbers growing by hundreds of students a year, and the number of physical locations which we were trying to service as well. As I mentioned, we're up to about 10 campuses at the moment. And we were looking for something to unify all those into one platform. And that's where we found JumpCloud. And it was unifying a lot of those services in pieces of infrastructure, security and compliance into one sort of pane of glass for us. And there's nothing else which we had found at the time and which we've seen since, which really does it in the same way. And that's things like identity and access management. Now the MDM features in JumpCloud are quite robust as well. Things like password management, endpoint device management, software installs, patching, updates, all kinds of things. And it's really helped us to bring 10 to 15 different services into one platform, and to reduce the amount of overhead in terms of time and effort to manage it. And a lot of the sort of the risk and the keeping up to date with maintenance, and in particular for Apple administration, you always are having to keep up to date with new versions of Mac OS. That's all been externalized, and we're very happy that the engineers at JumpCloud are taking care of that for us. So it's been a good journey, and it's been about 6 years now since we've implemented, and we've been able to grow with JumpCloud as well. So when we first implemented, we were at this scale, and JumpCloud has grown in terms of the number and the types of features they're offering, and that's really helped us as we've grown as well. We were lucky enough pre-COVID to have already begun our implementation of JumpCloud, and that made that transition into fully remote or hybrid working very smooth. And as I mentioned before, we're in the process of launching a online school and an online high school and various other programs. It'll help us as well to provision ICT resources for teachers who may be teaching remotely, as well as for our students. And so it's really going to help us a lot with our strategic vision as well going forward, not just with the day-to-day bits and bobs of managing IT.
So I'm hearing so many good things. One is, the consolidation of all these different apps and bringing everything into one place, being able to manage devices across different locations, which is also great to hear. And I'm glad to hear that you're using like our other newer features like JumpCloud Password Manager. So it seems like you were able to sort of, cut costs and get rid of managing multiple different applications. So this is what we aim to do. So that's really good to hear. Obviously, working in a school means that you're dealing with education technology, and I'm sure there's like specific compliance standards that you have to meet when you're talking about like data, especially around data of children. So could you tell us some more about the EdTech compliance standards and how JumpCloud helps you meet those regulations or requirements?
Sure. Yeah, and I think when people are thinking of compliance and information security, where they go first are things like hospitals and banks, government, and those for sure have quite stringent compliance requirements. But education as well. Some people might not be their go-to example of a compliance environment which is very complex and stringent, but it is quite so. We're managing data for our students and their families. That's demographic information, behavioral data, academic, and even sometimes financial and medical data. So the responsibility we have to manage a lot of that data, various types of data in different locations, it's quite difficult. And again, going back to some previous points about how we're expanding our physical footprint, we are expanding the provision of education services online, and that comes with it, overlapping regulations and compliance for different areas in which our students are joining us from, whether it's the European Union, North America. We have a lot of students joining us from countries in Asia Pacific. It gets quite complicated. And in previous iterations of our sort of approach to information security and compliance, the framework we were using to manage that and ensuring we were in compliance and our day-to-day operations were really two distinct things, right? Information security for us was traditionally sort of this abstract, as I think it is for a lot of organizations, where when it's time, right, when it's time to be audited, or when it's time to recertify, or when a regulation, is updated and you need to get in compliance, let's go back to the drawing board, or let's open up a spreadsheet, let's do a CSV export and share all that data with the regulatory body or whoever else needs to see it. And the shift we've been able to make with JumpCloud is to get rid of that distinction, to get rid of the abstraction between actual practice and the concept of security, because what JumpCloud allows us to do is to essentially embed security and compliance into our everyday operating. And so the way that the platform is developed is with all of this in mind. And we have, as I said, overlapping regulations. We are based out of Japan. We do a lot of education with students maybe based out of the EU. So we have to be wary of GDPR compliance and other things. And JumpCloud really just ticks all those boxes for us by virtue of the way it's architected, really. And so when we are going through, for example, an audit, or we are sharing evidence with a regulatory body for compliance, there's not a lot to do for us, really. There's simply us going into the JumpCloud platform and using some of the tools in there, which allows to visualize or export and share different things, like whether it's patching of browsers or desktop operating software version updates and things like this. We can quite easily access that and view it, and it's up to date, right? So the information in JumpCloud is our real life production IT environment. It's not a snapshot of something from last month or anything like that. And so we can quite easily go and look and make sure that we're up to date. But the extent to which we even need to proactively check on things and remember to do things is also quite less than it was before we implemented JumpCloud, because JumpCloud itself, again, the way it is architected is either by default we are in compliance, or at the very least we're receiving proactive and automated updates on things. and we know where and when we need to maybe take a look at an endpoint device or a configuration or a user and their access and permissions and things like this. So yeah, it's really streamlined that for us. That's for most places, I think, regardless of size, and in particular, maybe for smaller places that don't have the personnel, the infrastructure, the expertise in house to do all this stuff. I mean, a platform like this really takes away a lot of that burden for you, and it's really helped us in that area. And our core business is not information security. Our core business is education and education technology, and allows us to focus really on creating value for our students and improving what we do as a core business rather than spending over over amounts of time on the compliance aspect. So it's much appreciated.
I think that's definitely something that we aim to do is to simplify the entire process, especially for companies that are not in technology or in software and security. So you don't have to be on the phone trying to say, click export, now click download CSV, and then email me that CSV. You can just have everything in one place. So that's also really good to hear. You mentioned things like browser updates and operating system updates and patching. Could you tell us a bit more in detail, maybe about some of the specific policies and features that you use in JumpCloud? Maybe that help you with your compliance and security or just
Sure.
getting work done easily.
Yeah, there's quite a lot we could cover, but I think some of the main ones for us are as a primarily Apple-based organization. A lot of our endpoints are, as I mentioned, iMacs, MacBooks, iPads, iPhones. We also are mixed environment in the sense that we have Windows-based endpoint devices. We have a lot of endpoints which might be running various distributions of Linux as well. And so the MDM features and features for updating OS versions, patching the software, especially, a lot of our threat vectors are coming through, browser-based solutions nowadays. And so we can update our browser software on all those endpoint devices as well. And we can see all of that in a single pane of glass. We don't have to chase people down because those updates are automated, right? And they're timely. So we know that at any given time, every single endpoint device in our environment is up to date with all of its software versions, its security. We can also ensure that third-party threat detection software from other vendors is installed on those endpoints, and we can get insights from that. And in the event that anything is out of compliance, something wasn't connected to the network, something else happened, we know about it right away. And so it's really, really simplified that, because that's a huge part of compliance nowadays, is making sure things are updated in a timely fashion and that we can prove that they are. And that's really sort of taken care of for us with JumpCloud. And it's not to say that it's a blanket approach as well, because we have the ability to customize to an extent the way in which these updates are rolled out. We have different policy groups. For example, we don't want to send out an OS update to 300 people at once. We want to trial that in a couple different waves, right? So it allows us to do that very easily. Another thing with compliance, I think, is that in terms of user identity and access, again, it's very transparent. We can have other departments, whether it's our human resources department, finance, other people involved with processes like developing those protocols, helping to design onboarding procedures, user groups to provision access to resources, some of which are quite sensitive, as you might imagine. And again, that's all taken care of with JumpCloud as well. So there's really no question of whether, for example, an employee has left the organization. Have they maintained or retained access to some critical or sensitive company resources or student or customer data? No, they haven't, because whether it's onboarding, provisioning, or deprovisioning and offboarding, it's all handled very seamlessly with JumpCloud. And so there are no dark corners, right, of our IT environment where we don't know what's going on and we can't see who has access to what. It's all quite transparent, but secure at the same time.
Fantastic. That actually brings me to my next question, which is, do you have a dream feature that you would like JumpCloud to implement if you could just wave a magic wand?
It might not be that ambitious, but one of the things that we are considering and would be quite useful to leverage, and JumpCloud has begun implementing some of these features, but it would be through the MDM portion of the JumpCloud platform to offer more self-service features for end users to, for example, provision themselves software installations and things like this from a sort of a catalog of software which we've made available to them. And so JumpCloud, even in its current configuration, makes it quite easy for our IT services team to receive requests for software installations, vet them, and then action those completely remotely. Very frictionless, very easy. It's a service we offer to end users, and it strikes that balance between secure and managed, but also convenient for everyone who we are trying to help. But if we could take that one step further and offer even more self-service tools through the JumpCloud portal for end users, I think they would appreciate it even more. So that's one thing I can think of.
Awesome. But with great power comes great responsibility. So that is a fine line that we have to plan for and design for. So I hear you. Because I remember hearing many years ago that kids in schools had figured out how to unenroll their iPads. So those are
Yep.
always fun challenges to come across and like plan for and mitigate. So we hear you, and I'll definitely pass that on internally. In terms of the future of EdTech, in terms of the future of JumpCloud being a part of that, what do you see happening in the next 10 years or 20 years?
Mm, good question. So I think that the trend, one of the trends in education that's accelerating is sort of this uh, decentralized model. And so we have a lot more flexibility, a lot more modularity in the way that students actually learn and earn credentials and matriculate through, primary and secondary school and off to university. And students have a lot more control over that pathway of learning. And in order to support a more dynamic and sort of flexible learning journey for students, our educators, our teachers, our faculty, who are sort of the heart and soul of any school, are going to have to adapt as well and be that much more flexible in their provision of education to the kids. And in order for any IT team to support that happening, we're going to have to adapt to the reality that the technology resources and the way in which they're used, where they're used, all these things is going to become a lot more open. The surface area, right, is going to widen, and the degree of control we have over that is going to lessen in some respects. And so I think one of the areas where we're already quite confident JumpCloud is going to support us is with the sort of distributed or hybrid or zero trust model, which JumpCloud is sort of basing their architecture around, which is to say, look, traditionally you might have had a data center or an on-premise server cluster or something where everything was physically and logically in the same place. But nowadays, you might have services hosted in AWS over here in Singapore, and you have something on premise here, and it's all just this milieu of different tools. But if you have again that single pane where you can manage identity and access in a quite secure, transparent, zero trust model, then that's not a concern, or it's not nearly as much of a concern as it would be if you were doing more traditional IT, where this is kind of confronting and scary. But we're not really worried about that because the backbone of provisioning access to all these resources for us is JumpCloud. And to us, at the moment, there's no question about whether we'll be able to adapt to those changes. So, when our executive team comes and says, "Hey, maybe we're going to open a school in, overseas next year," or doing all this stuff online, we're not worried. We can support that. JumpCloud helps us do it, and pretty much wherever students or teachers or other people may be working and studying at any given time. And where those technology services are being used isn't nearly as much of a consideration. So those are the trends, right? They're going to be flexible, designed to the needs of the students. There's going to be a lot of personal choice, and with that, the borders to technology and how it's used opening right up. But I think JumpCloud for us will be in the middle of that, and making sure that it's sort of a fun experience for people rather than the scary one that we need to go overly conservative approach with.
Yeah, I think this is all like fantastic news for the adults in the education vertical. But I read news recently that kids don't get snow days off anymore because they have online classes instead. So yeah, kids
Yeah,
get ready to embrace technology because we're not going anywhere.
that's right. In Tokyo, we don't have too many snow days. It snows here maybe a couple of days a year. Well, we have our typhoon days, and that used to be a big thing
Mm.
when a typhoon rolls in, right? Kids are happy because they're not going to go to school. But nowadays, uh, school
is
can
coming to
happen
them.
online, so they're a little less happy about it. But yeah, you raise a good point.
Yeah, so I mean, we all have to adapt and move forward and keep things going. So I'm sure they'll have different stories to tell their kids someday. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time to do this and for telling us so much about the EdTech space and how JumpCloud helps you with it. Hopefully, we'll continue to have a long partnership between our bus schools and JumpCloud. So thank you and talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you as well. Take care.